3 days into my rotation, I found a note taped inside the pressure gauge housing. Not the logbook, not the official system. Inside the casing of the gauge, folded twice, and written on the back of a tide chart. Whoever wrote it had pressed so hard with the pen that the letters had almost gone through the paper. The note said, "Do not count the lights." That was it. No signature, no date, no explanation of which lights or why, or what happens if you do. I stared at it for a while, standing there in the wet haze of the airlock corridor, with water still dripping off my suit. And I thought about what kind of person writes that and then leaves it somewhere they know only the next person will find. Not a warning you put in a note and hide. Warnings go in the logbook. They get initialed and dated and passed up the chain. What you put in a hidden note is something you cannot say out loud and still expect to be believed. I worked underwater research stations for 11 years before I got assigned to Platform Kessler. 3 rotations on the shelf installations off the Danish coast, 2 more near Gotland. One that lasted 8 months on a decommissioned rig they repurposed for sediment research. I know what these places feel like from the first day. The recycled air, the particular way sound carries in a sealed space under pressure. The specific quality of artificial light when there is no natural light to compare it to. Kessler felt different from the moment I descended. Not bad, exactly, just layered. Like a room someone has lived in for a long time before you arrived, and they took their things but they did not take everything. The note went into my pocket. I went to find the person leaving for the surface. Her name was Dr. Voigt. She was already suited up when I found her in the equipment bay, helmet under her arm, moving like she could not get to the ascent line fast enough. I asked about the note. She looked at me, and something in her face did something I cannot name exactly. Not fear. The word I keep coming back to is finished. She looked finished with a question she had been carrying for 9 weeks. Follow the 4 protocols, she said. They are in the secondary binder, not the main one. Follow them, and do not ask why until after. Then she was gone. The secondary binder was thin, 11 pages, most of them standard decompression tables. The protocols were on page 9, typed, no annotations, no author listed. 4 of them. Short, specific, and written with the kind of restraint that comes from someone trying very hard not to explain too much. I read all 4 standing at the table. Then I read them again. That was the last ordinary thing I did on Kessler. The first protocol said, between 0200 and 0400, remain on the upper level. I followed this without testing it. I had learned from the gauge note that testing was not how these rules were meant to be engaged with. The second night, I woke at 0130 and lay in my bunk for 30 minutes listening to the station. These places have a sound signature you learn fast. The hum of the filtration system, the slow rhythm of the ballast adjustments, the faint ping of the proximity sensors in the outer hull. I knew all of those sounds within the first 12 hours. But what I heard at 0145 was none of those things. It was movement. Below me, on the lower level, in the equipment storage corridor that ran the length of the station's underside, something moving through that space slowly, without any of the mechanical logic of the station's systems. A drag, followed by a pause. Then the drag again. I stayed on the upper level. In the morning I went down and walked the corridor. The floor was clean. Everything was where it should be, except that along the left wall, near the base of the storage racks, there were marks I had not noticed before. Long horizontal lines in the anti-corrosion coating, evenly spaced, running for about 2 meters before stopping. They looked old. They looked like they had been made by something being pulled along the wall, or pulling itself along it. I did not write this in the log. The part I have never told anyone from that rotation comes next. The second protocol said, Aka, do not open any exterior panel without first checking the sediment sensor feed. I understood this one faster than the others, because on the fourth day, I needed access to the external cable housing to check a connector that had been reading intermittent on the board. I pulled up the sediment sensor feed first, the way the protocol said. The feed shows a real-time image of the seafloor within 8 meters of the station's base. There was something resting against the eastern strut. I almost did not register what I was seeing because it was so still, and because my brain kept trying to fit it into a category. Large marine animal, I thought first. Then debris. Then I looked at the shape of it more carefully. It was not moving, but it was positioned with a deliberateness that debris does not have. Settled against the strut, the way something settles when it has chosen to be there. Long and pale in the sensor image, with a texture the camera could not resolve clearly from that angle. I did not open the exterior panel that day. I checked the sediment feed 17 times over the next 48 hours. By the second day, it was gone. By the third day, I had almost convinced myself of the debris explanation. Almost. The third protocol I will not describe in detail. I will only say that it involved the viewport on the lower level, and that after one incident, in the third week, I sealed it with the emergency shutter and left it sealed. The image I saw through that glass in the 4 seconds before I pulled the lever is the reason I have not been back to an underwater station since. That was 2 years ago. I have been asked twice why I terminated my contract early. Both times I said health reasons, which is not entirely untrue. The fourth protocol was one sentence, do not count the lights. I never understood that one. There were no unusual lights on Kessler. Nothing bioluminescent came close to the station in the time I was there. I watched carefully. I followed the other 3 protocols, and nothing approached the external viewports in any way that involved light. On my last night, I went back to the secondary binder. Page 9. The 4 protocols. I read the 4th one again, and then I turned the page, which I had never done, because I assumed the binder ended there. It did not. Page 10 had one line, handwritten, different pen than the protocols, added later. It said, the 4th protocol is the only one that means what it says. I have thought about that sentence every few months for 2 years, about what it implies regarding the other 3, about whether following a rule correctly and following it for the right reason are the same thing. I still do not know what the lights are. I think that may be the point.